Good morning, St. Malachy parents. This is Mr. Dwyer. This is our 11 a.m. parent webinar. We're going to go over our reopening plans. So thank you again to everyone who joined us on Zoom. And if you're watching this on the website, we thank you for the time as well. I'm going to share my screen at this time, and we'll go through a little presentation, and then we'll go through our question and answer. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that we know what a crazy time this has been, and even with the CPS news that has been coming out yesterday and this morning that CPS is shifting to all online, we know that things are continuing to change. So we've been working very, very hard along with the Archdiocese and the state of Illinois to put plans in place that are going to be beneficial for students and for teachers and parents and staff. So I'm excited to go through some of this with you all, and I look forward to answering your questions and continuing to keep you posted as things go along. So just as an overview, we really take our mission of educating students here on the near west side very seriously. It's we've been here for over 120 years. Ms. Miller's been at the school for more than 40 years. I've been involved with the school since 2003. So we know we've had generations of families and students come through this school, and we want that to continue, even though this year is going to look very different. So we still want to have the same attitude of open arms and open doors that we've always had, but just shifting it to emphasize health and safety during this particular time. All right. So we are going to continue to prioritize health and safety recommendations first and foremost. So we are following the governor's mandates. The mayor, if the mayor were to issue any particular mandates, we would follow those as we are in the city of Chicago. And then as far as educationally, we're following the Archdiocese of Chicago, not Chicago Public Schools or any other districts. We are functioning as our own district, but we will also do whatever the Archdiocese recommends for their schools. So at this point in time, we are following Illinois guidance to say that in-person instruction is a safe option with the conditions that we're going to explain. And since that is the case, since it can be done with a relative level of safety, we know that there are certain parents many parents who want to prioritize that and want their students to return, either because of their own working situation or because of students' learning needs or because of a variety of reasons. And so that's why we've, from the kind of June onward, we've been making plans as though we were going to return so that we can be as ready as possible and do it as safely as possible when that time comes. We have also made the decision to offer fully online options for anyone who does not feel ready to have their students return to school fully in person at this time. So we do recognize that there are people who are in that situation who will need an in-person, an online option, okay? Sorry. Okay. So so to get into some of the details, and we'll go more into this later, but just to give everyone, this is important information. Our first day of school was scheduled to be Tuesday, August 25th. We are still going to start that week. However, we're going to focus on in-person instruction that week, and we're actually going to spread it out over 3 days to do a start that week, with each family being assigned 1 day of that first week, during which to come, have students spend the day, see what the day will look like, and then we'll be able to do it in manageable numbers so that we won't be all overwhelmed on the first day of going back with the new reality. So we know that might be that's very different than we've done in the past, but we think it's warranted under these circumstances. And I'll go into a little more of that detail later. But just so everyone knows, we are starting that week, but it will not be a full week of school for students. And with that in mind as well, the first day for online instruction will be the following Monday, August 31st, when we'll kick off our full online instruction, okay? And as I said, we are still relying on recommendations of the governor, the mayor, and the Centers for Disease Control. So, you know, it's possible that these plans that I'm sharing today may change. We're just trying to plan as best we can for right now so that we have things in place as we move forward to do the best instruction possible, okay? So now I'm going to go over kind of the outline for in-person instruction, some of the expectations, and then I'm going to move to online instruction, and then we'll bring them both together towards the end, okay? So hopefully people have gotten our communications via email to hear some of this information already, but the idea for in-person instruction is that teachers, students, and staff will wear masks throughout the day when they're in their classes. The only times that students will be able to remove their masks would be if they're outdoors, spread more than 6 feet apart, or when they're eating lunch or eating, if there's a snack time in the younger grades, when they're eating and spread more than 6 feet apart, or similarly for pre-K and K for students who take a nap, if they're napping and spread more than 6 feet apart. So other than that, they will be expected to keep their masks on. And so we know that's a big adjustment for everybody. So, you know, anyone who is planning to send students back in person, if you can help them practice keeping those masks on for longer and longer times, we don't want to, you know, make it so hard on them, but we do want them to start getting used to that feeling, okay? And then desks will be spaced out as much as possible. We are setting up the rooms planning to have 6 feet of space in between desks. There are some, I can go into more details if people have questions about this. The challenge that we're facing right now is there's a number of people who are on the fence between in-person and online options. And whether those people choose in-person or online is going to impact the number of students that we obviously have in each classroom. So the number that we're shooting for and planning on is between 15 and 20 per class. 15 is a good round number because at 15 feet, we're able to maintain the full 6 feet of social distance, and we are able to operate with students remaining in that class throughout the day. If we get up to 20, you know, we're not gonna turn our regular families away if they would choose for in-person learning at that point. However, we are still able to follow the guidelines that students remain at least 3 to 6 feet away at all times. However, for purposes of eating lunch or things like that, when students would have to take their mask down, that's when we would have to separate those students in groups of 20 into smaller groups so that they could still maintain the full 6 feet of distance when their mask would be removed. So I cannot, so that's why every message you see from me is encouraging people, please register, please let us know what your preference is between in-person and online so that we can know exactly how to set up the rooms to maximize social distance, okay? So classes will be smaller due to some people choosing online learning, which is a option that we are happy to offer. So, so we are feeling good about the numbers that we're going to have, but we're just not able to finalize those numbers yet, and we're working very hard to do that as soon as we can. So something, if you are planning on in-person learning this year, that I want everyone to keep in mind is that if your child is sick, you're going to have to make arrangements for them to stay home, probably for at least 2 to 3 days at a time, if not more, depending on their symptoms. So I know that as a parent, that can be very challenging. However, in the reality that we're facing, students who are symptomatic, who have a fever, a dry cough, or other respiratory symptoms that would potentially be indicative of COVID-19 will have to stay at home. They will be able to learn from home using our online learning platform that we're going to discuss. But it will require parents to partner with us and make alternate arrangements. We won't be able to, take students and then have them waiting in the office to be picked up. They'll have to be either stay home from the beginning of the day, or if they do get a fever during the day, they'll have to be picked up as soon as possible, and to remain at home until those symptoms have been gone for 48 to 72 hours. So we're looking more into that, but we're going to follow the guidance of the health experts on that. Okay. So that's if you're in person. I'm just encouraging you to have those plans, those backup plans in mind. Hopefully they won't be necessary initially, but just to keep it in mind. Students' movement will be limited throughout the building. We're going to utilize something called a cohort model, where students are going to stay within their own class throughout the day to minimize the spread of germs and to keep the exposure to a minimum. So only those students in that classroom and the teacher and a teacher's assistant will be the only ones who are breaking social distancing within each classroom. And the reason for that is, as we'll talk about later, if someone were to get sick, we would have to go into a quarantine procedure where students would have to stay home for up to 2 weeks. And with that in mind, we want to keep those numbers as small as we can so that we can minimize the number of students who would have to stay at home under those circumstances. Okay. So that means for specials, for Title I, for all those things, teachers will come into the classroom, but they'll remain socially distant from students during that time. Pardon me, I'm going to stop the share for one moment and see if I can admit someone to the waiting room. Hello. Hi, new parents. Sorry for the delay on that. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to continue our presentation, and then we'll take questions at the end. Okay. And we are recording this, so if you miss something, you'll be able to watch it later on. Okay, so we're talking about keeping students within their classes. If we're able to distance 6 feet apart within the classroom, students will even eat lunch in their classroom so that there is, again, less overlap of students to potentially spread germs back and forth if they're using the same space like the cafeteria. So we will be cleaning the classrooms more frequently. We will be disinfecting throughout the day. We're putting in additional sinks and additional hand washing stations and we will have hand sanitizer in every classroom so that students can sanitize their hands and be hygienic while they're here. But keeping students kind of to their own class is a big part of how we're going to keep students as safe as possible. So obviously this is a bit of a bummer for how we normally like to encourage students to interact, to work together, to even help each other between different grade levels. And unfortunately for right now, those things are going to have to take a back seat. But we still believe that even with social distancing and with masks on, that students can learn in person in a pretty valuable way. If that's something that you are prioritizing, we think it can be a positive experience for students. We are going to have daily outdoor recess to the greatest extent possible, at least once and hopefully twice per day, to give students a chance to remove their masks, run around a little bit, and be kids in a safe and healthy way. And we will be increasing the cleaning and disinfecting protocols that we'll be using as well. At this point, I'm going to continue on, but please note if you have any questions, again, you can enter them in the chat and we'll come back to them at the end. I might answer your questions coming up here, but if you want to enter them in now, you're welcome to do that. Otherwise, I want to give some information about online instruction, and then we'll be sure to leave time for questions at the end. Okay, so So for online instruction, students will be, pardon me, sorry. All students, whether you're here in school or learning online, every student will be connected to Google Classroom this year, whether you're in pre-K all the way up through 8th grade. Everyone will be on Google Classroom. We'll still use Class Dojo to send out messages and things like that, but really your main way of connecting will be through each teacher will set up a Google Classroom and students will log into that, that site. So every student will have their own email address and a Google Classroom. So we hope that by making everyone use the same platform, that will make it a little easier for parents. If you opt for the online instruction, you should be able to access all your child's curriculum and assignments, videos, etc. through that one site. There will still be some additional apps that you might need, such as Zoom and iReady, among others. But those will all that information should be on the teacher's page. Okay. Obviously, if you're choosing online instruction, younger students, 3rd and 4th grade and below, will need assistance setting up, getting logged on, etc. So we hope that, for parents who are choosing that option, they're thinking about, who's going to be able to get students online. And we hope that students will be able to be somewhat independent while they're doing that learning. But, we do know that students also need support in that environment. And even for older students, we know that though they understand the technology and will probably be able to access it, pardon me, we know that parent monitoring and touching base to make sure they're on task and doing what they're supposed to do will be critical to their success as well, okay? So one thing to talk about is devices. In the spring, we were able to offer devices for families to take home if needed. Because we're going to have students in person learning who will also need devices, we're going to have to take a close look at that and be very purposeful in how we loan devices out. It is still our intention to offer devices and make sure that every family has access to a device. However, if you're planning for online instruction, we recommend that you plan for having a device for each student if possible, or at least, one to share that is your own. And then if that's not possible, please let us know and we will work with you. However, we do want to continue to offer devices, but we need to make sure that we're able to cover the students who are in person as well as online from home. So please keep us posted if you're in need of a device. Please let us know, and we could talk about that later in the meeting today. If you are thinking about buying a device, maybe you already have one. A lot of people obviously like iPads and things of that nature. I recommend that you consider a Google Chromebook or a Chrome tablet if you have a younger student for whom typing might be challenging, because we are using Google Classroom, and so Chromebooks and Chrome tablets are designed to work directly with Google Classroom, and they're less expensive than iPads. iPads also work with all these platforms. It's just that they cost a little bit more. So so I just want to put that out to people. Amazon may or may not have a supply of these devices at this time. So you may need to look at going to a actual store to buy them, just because I know many people are, many of these are on back order at this time, unfortunately. So we're working on that as well, and we will obviously keep you posted, okay? Another thing to note about online learning is that it will last one trimester at a time. So the first trimester goes until November, at which point we will obviously reevaluate. If we need to reevaluate sooner, we may end up doing that. But what we don't want is people to jump in and out of online learning on a week-by-week basis, because that's not the consistency that teachers need and that students need. So we want you to really think about it. And if you are committed to doing the online option, to commit to that for that first trimester. And if you do commit to online learning, students should expect to be engaged for a similar amount of time, not a full school day, but definitely for multiple hours throughout the day, and that will depend whether it's a primary student or an older grade student. But we do expect all students, even from down to pre-K up through 8th grade, that we're going to be offering online learning that they can access, and that it's going to be the expectation that they attend school virtually, even as they would in person. Okay, so let's see. Let's see if this is a good stopping point here. Okay, so I'm going to go into some more logistics, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment, and I'm going to see if people have an interest in asking any questions at this time. I believe that you should be able to unmute yourself if you do have a question. I see Miss Tate, so I'm going to ask to unmute her. And anyone else, again, feel free to use the chat, but I'd also love to hear other people's voices because I've been talking for too long. So, yeah, Ms. Tate, what's your question?
Okay, well, I have several.
Sure.
The first question is when because I'm considering online for Jarius, just because I have my reasons.
Yep.
But I wanted to know when you say they'll get online, like they're coming to school. So what time would they be on there? Like at 8 o'clock in the
Yes.
morning?
Great question. It's unlikely that. So the way that we're envisioning it is that a student will have mini lessons with their teacher at multiple points throughout the day. So they would have a reading mini lesson to watch or to join for, a math mini lesson to watch or to join for, and then maybe a class meeting or a question and answer session throughout the day. So those might be spread out throughout the day. So it's not necessarily the case that they would have to log on at 8 a.m. and just stay online all the way until 3 p.m. That's unlikely. What it will probably be is they'll have maybe a reading meeting at 8:30 and then a math meeting at 9:30. But those times could even switch depending on the class. And that let me go a little bit more into how we're trying to schedule that. Something I should have said at the top is that I can't. I don't know every answer right now, so I do appreciate the questions and the chance to answer some of them, like this one. However, there are things that we still need to figure out. So, for example, with the timing of the meetings, one thing that we need to keep in, one thing that we as a school are trying to make sure is that we have enough bandwidth to deliver the learning to everyone. And what that means is we're probably going to have to space out the meetings a little bit throughout the day. So, like I said, it could be that they have a meeting around, like a meeting around 9 and a meeting around 10:30, or a meeting around 8:30 and a meeting around 9 o'clock, or a meeting around 10 a.m. and a meeting around noon. I don't want to make any promises as to what time those meetings would be, but that is kind of what we're thinking. And we're also trying to schedule in the time to have, like, if students have questions or if students need extra help, how we can also provide that in an online setting. But basically, we're committed to making sure that they have the support that they need to continue learning, continue completing their assignments. It would not be where they would have to sit at the computer all the way from 8 until 3, but it would be where they would need to check in at least at multiple times throughout the day. So I'm sorry, I can't tell you the exact specific time, but the point is, it wouldn't be like, 8:01, they're late. It would be more like, okay, the 7th grade reading meeting is at this time each day. So Jerry knows he needs to be there for that meeting, and then for the math meeting, and then for the whatever other meetings the teacher puts in place. Okay.
So they'll pretty much have an itinerary as to the times that they need to get on.
Correct.
Another question I had, when they do um, their tests, the tests that they have, like their reading test, the science test, and all these tests that they take, for their reading grades and all that, how would that go about?
Yeah, that's a great question.
How
That's something that all our schools are trying to figure out. Some of those are technical questions that we are still
still working on?
working with.
Okay.
So in terms of assessing students from their own teachers, we're able to do a lot of that based on, not necessarily on like standardized formal tests, but on different types of assessments, whether it's, you know, their written work or their verbal answers in a class discussion.
Okay.
We are gonna, so we are gonna ask them to submit work, obviously, and we'll grade that work. And we'll try to probably put more emphasis on that rather than on like tests and quizzes per se. But one thing that does bring up is the idea of like standardized test scores, and especially for students in 7th grade and 8th grade, but really all grades, for better or worse, we know that standardized tests are part of our school system these days. And so this past year in the spring, we're not able to give the Aspire test that students normally take in the spring to see what kind of progress they've made. So that's something that we're not able to solve on our own because it's through outside organization, but we are working on ways to try to ensure that we get some kind of information from students to show what kind of progress they've been making. And, that's something that high schools might or might not look at depending on, the individual school. So we're going to work on that for sure. And we obviously have a couple months to do that, but we're still going to think about it. And then the other thing I want to say about that is the iReady program that a lot of younger grade students use. We're going to roll this iReady program out for the whole school this year. And what iReady does is it's a individualized learning program that students can take assessments throughout the year to see how they're doing and what they need to work on. So when we do those iReady, it won't necessarily go for your grade what score you got, but it will be helpful to see what you need to work on. And so for anyone who used iReady last year, we encourage you, don't help your student when it comes to the assessment. You can help them with the lessons and with the learning, but when we do the assessments throughout the year, whatever form that takes, we are going to ask for parent cooperation in terms of make sure your student does this by themselves. And,
Okay.
there is a possibility that for like 7th and 8th graders for their high school tests later in the year that we would do a socially distanced like testing day where they would come in maybe to the gym or to the cafeteria if we're not able to do that using technology. But that's down the road. So we're going to wait a little bit until we plan that. But that's a good question. Thank you.
Okay. And who is the 7th grade teacher? And then I'm done. That's it.
I'm gonna hold off on if you don't mind. I'm gonna hold off on the teacher announcements because we do have a bunch of we do have some new teachers, and so I'm gonna share that information at a later date. But I can talk with you later about that.
Okay.
So
that's
thanks.
fine.
Okay. All right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Okay. Did anyone else have any questions at this time? I'm sure there's a lot. Sometimes it's hard to ask in a Zoom, but feel free to, call us up if you do have any questions. Anyone else want to speak up? I know we're all on mute, so I can.
Yeah, I can ask a question if that's okay.
Yes, please, Miss Stanton. Yes.
I have another child that's in high school that also attends a private school as well. And what they're doing, the kids are going to school 2 days out the week, and then they're going to do the online learning for the other 3 days or whatever.
Yes.
Is this an option that St. Malachy will be offering as well? Like, let's just say, for instance, we do decide to put them in there, and then we make a decision that this is not working for us, or opposite, we are at home first, and you said you have to go up to November. But if we do decide, well, we've been at home and everything's been going okay for those kids that are in school, can we make that decision to actually send them back?
Yeah, those are great questions. So let me separate those out. So this idea of a hybrid model where students attend for in-person 2 days and then are at home 3 days. Let me speak on that. So we are not offering that option. And I know some parents are asking for that. And so, it's unfortunate that we're not able to offer every option. So let me just explain a little bit of why we made the decision that we did, and hopefully some of the benefits of it, even though we recognize there are challenges of it as well. So basically, we did not, as a school, have the choice to do that. It was made decision, just like districts are making these decisions on the whole, and sometimes independent schools like Catholic high schools have a little more flexibility. But by us being a grammar school as part of the Archdiocese, we are following what the Archdiocese is recommending. And the reason the Archdiocese made that recommendation is for young students of the age that we're dealing with, them being out of school for 2 days and in school for 2, or excuse me, out of school for 3 and in for 2, can actually breaks up the grouping that we're trying to create potentially a lot more by those kids all having to be in maybe different daycares or different, not that everyone would go to daycare, some would be able to stay at home, but we don't know where those students are going in the days that they're not here. And so there's a chance that it actually increases the level of exposure by doing the hybrid model. Now we recognize, especially in high schools where students go through different classes throughout the day and they switch from one class to another, it might be it's a better model for older students who can also work more independently when they are at home. So we also just recognize that consistency is important, especially for younger students. So we know that there's different approaches. This is the approach that we're opting for, is the fully in-person or the fully online. And we're not able to offer a hybrid at this time. So I can speak more on that if you would like. But as far as the opting in and out, or the kind of, let's see how it goes and then we'll make our decision, I definitely respect people's the changing circumstances and everybody's need to make the decision that's best for them, and that might change. So what I would ask is that you make the best decision for you and your family at this moment with the most confidence that you are able to, and then we go with that, and we see how things shake out. If you start in person, it's easier to shift to online than it is to start online and shift to in person. And the reason for that is just because of numbers. Like, let's say we start out a year with 15 students in a class in person in the 5th grade class, and then 2 families or 1 family even who has opted for online wants to switch to in person. We have to find physical room in the class for that additional student, which might not be a big deal, but it might have the ability to throw off that social distancing. And what if we now need to reconfigure the lunch plan, or that's the main thing, I guess, would be the lunch or the social distancing. So as a result, that's why we're asking for people to think about it in terms of a little bit of a longer commitment. But if you are unsure, it would be easier to switch from in person and then to go fully online, rather than to go fully online and then switch to in person, if that makes sense. So feel free to follow up on any of those points, but hopefully that at least gives you a little bit of information. And we know that not everybody is going to be thinking this is the ideal situation, but this is, we all know that we're doing things differently, and this is the best plan that we are able to come up with at this time, and we do feel good about it. But we understand that things are not going to be easy regardless. So Ms. Stan, what do you think about that? Did you have any follow-up or anything else to add?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, is that Ms. Burke? Sorry.
Yes.
Yes.
We're kind of up on the fence about in online or in school instruction. Now, with the online, will it kind of work like the summer school? Will we be able to pick up material, Will there be a syllabus or something for us to follow?
It will be, yeah, for online, it should be, our goal is to have each teacher create their classroom, their Google Classroom, and for whether you're in person or at home, you're accessing the same Google Classroom materials, okay? So, so hopefully that means that as opposed to summer school, which I imagine was a little bit more day to day, it was like the teacher comes on, we go through the lesson, we do some work, but there wasn't like a home base for your students. There weren't like as many resources available on an ongoing basis. So for this online learning, it would be more robust. I'm going to say it would be like a more complete program where I'm trying to think of an example. But the idea is Google Classroom creates like a group of all the, let's say, first graders or kindergartners or whatever the case may be. And then and then instead of Class Dojo where you see the posts and they get like all lined up on your phone, if you use Class Dojo, it can be a little bit confusing at times. This way, there's just one place where you go and everything is listed for that whole week. You could even potentially look back to previous weeks and access information. So we think that using Google Classroom will make it more organized and more centrally located, whether it's teachers posting videos, posting assignments, and that will also be a way for students to hand in assignments. So we will be doing parent orientations for Google Classroom as we start off the year. And there will be a day during that first week. That's why we're trying to do a staggered start, which I can go more into in a minute, is that first week, rather than having everyone start on one day and try to do a big back to school open house that would not be able to work under current limitations. If we start with 1/3 of our students each day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're optimistic that we could have mini parent orientations outside in the park at the end of each day. And then we could give you the passwords, we could give you the login information, et cetera, et cetera. Now, and then that Friday, we're saying as of now that that's going to be a teacher staff development day to take a step back, look at how everything worked during the first week. And we also hope that we would be able to offer online learning orientation during that day to help everyone get logged on and set up, not necessarily to like start the lessons, but to at least get people familiarized with the process. Okay, so that's a little bit about that, Ms. Burks. If there's more specific things I can tell you, feel free to ask any follow-ups or if anyone else.
Thank you. Now, also with the online, I don't know if you stated this earlier, will Title I be an option?
Yes, we just had that meeting yesterday, and what we're planning to do is with our 2 Title I teachers, rather than each Title I teacher taking in a group to their own classroom, what we're going to do is we're going to have one Title I teacher be the in-person Title I for that grade, and one person be the online Title I for that grade, so that both in-person and online should have a Title I option available for small group instruction and academic support.
And would that be combining the grades, like K and first grade together, or separate grades?
As of now, our plan is to maintain every grade as its own classroom. And we think that's going to be the most, manageable for both teachers, parents, kids, and everybody. However, I can't say 100% that we would never combine grades under these circumstances, depending on how our numbers work out. For example, if we had one class that had, let's say, 20 students in person and another class that only had 10 students in person, there is a chance that we would look at shifting students to another grade, but it's possible that would be under very limited circumstances. So I can't say 100% that we wouldn't ever combine grades, but as of now, it's not our intention or our plan to do that, and we think we can make it work with the current numbers that we have. However, again, that's the caveat of a lot of people are on the fence, and so we're asking people make the best decision that you can, and then to help us have the ability to plan for what it's going to look like. And then we will go from there, of course. All right.
And one more question, sorry.
Yeah, no
Now,
problem.
with the in-school instruction for the pre-K and the kindergarten classes, you said that you're practicing social distancing, the 6 feet apart, but are you bringing in desks for them, or they're going to still have those tables? How is that going to work out? Because my concern is for all the children, but mainly the smaller children.
Yeah.
We're trying to keep their masks and the social distancing.
Yeah, so let me tell you what has been the guidelines that I've received and that what we're going to follow. You know, it's possible that we may need to have a follow-up conversation about primary early childhood grades, but generally speaking, obviously we're gonna try to uphold social distancing to the greatest extent possible. I believe with little kids that young students, I should say, that is going to be very hard to keep them 6 feet apart at all times, right? So that's why we're asking them to wear their masks, so that if they do get within 6 feet of each other, that they will be, that it will be, you know, it should be for just a short time, and then they're, oh, okay, remember we got to stay apart. But that they would have their masks on during that time, so that at least if it did happen, it, you know, they would still have a level of safety there. In terms of the seating within the room, we are looking at different ways to do it. And the key is that they would be, let's say there is a chance that they would still be seated at tables. However, we would bring in additional tables so that there would be fewer students at each table, so that students could maximize that social distance. And the bottom line is that in order to, anytime they need to remove their mask, so to eat or to take a rest, they would have to be at least 6 feet apart. So we will be able to guarantee that there will be at least 6 feet of space within the room during those particular times. There is a chance during other learning times that there might be less than 6 feet. So what they're saying, what the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying, is that at least 3 to 6 feet away when they're wearing masks during learning time. So that is the baseline that we're using for those younger students, as we set up the rooms, knowing that we do have a little bit of extra space in some of those primary grade rooms. And so we're going to try to take advantage of that, but also knowing that we still want them to be able to learn from their teachers. And so if a student is, you know, 30 feet away across the classroom, that might not be the ideal situation. So, so there's kind of a both and approach, that we will definitely ensure at least 6 feet of space during those mandated times. And then we're going to work to maximize it during those other times. Okay. Thanks, Ms. Burks.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Let me check the chat. Feel free to use the chat. All right, what I'm going to do, I know it's coming on to 12 o'clock, so if anyone needs to leave, feel free. I'm going to go back into screen sharing to go through a little bit of the plan for a couple more details, okay? And then if you do need to leave, I'm going to try to post this to the school website so you can find it there, all right? But again, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll allow for even a little more time for questions in a bit here. So let me go back into screen sharing, and I'm going to go ahead to talk about this. I kind of already talked about this, but how we're going to do our first week of school a little bit differently. If anyone has any feedback on this, I'd appreciate it. We do want to start still on August 25th, but we're going to assign each family or each student only one day to attend during that week, so that we can go through our procedures and make sure that everything is safe. We would plan to hold parent orientations that week. Ideally, we would do it at drop-off for pre-K and K, and then at pickup for 1st through 8th grade. in a way that would be safe, either outside or in limited numbers. And then Friday of that week, we will have no student attendance and do a staff PD day to make sure our policies are appropriate and adjust if needed. And then we would also do our online learning orientation on that Friday. And then Monday, the 31st, would be a full in-person day with full, for those who are both online and in person starting on that day, okay? Someone asked in the chat about school uniforms. We'll still have our school uniforms. We're considering some different options, like allowing students to wear gym uniforms during the early days of the year. So to be honest, that has not been decided yet. But if you're planning for in-person instruction, we still do encourage you to purchase a school uniform and a gym uniform for your student, in the same way that you normally would. There are some options for relaxing those somewhat, but we still want to maintain our consistency to the extent that we can. So thank you for that question. So this is some logistics about the first week. And then let me talk a little bit about arrival and dismissal, how we are thinking about that process. So arrival and dismissal will look a bit different this year, primarily because we're trying to minimize the crossing of different grades of students together. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to slightly adjust our hours for morning care. Instead of 6:30, we're planning on starting morning care at 7 o'clock. And that is due to the increased level of supervision that will be required. So if that's a major issue for you, please let us know, and we'll try to work with you. But we're planning to have morning care between 7 and 7:45 that students could enter the building and go to. It would most likely be two different morning care locations, and that then starting at 7:45 we would begin the arrival process. So most likely the youngest students would be asked to arrive at 7:45, and then would be admitted into their rooms between 7:45 and 7:55. Then we would take a 5-minute break to sterilize the hallways, and then we would admit the next group of students, and so on and so forth, with the oldest students being admitted at as late as 8:15. So this creates some logistics in terms of making sure that there's enough space. We don't have a parking lot, so making sure that traffic flow is going to be realistic. So that's another reason why we're trying to stagger the starts over that first week to see how that arrival procedures work. Students will have to get a temperature check with a thermometer when they enter, and a wellness check. If a student is sick at that time, we'll have to ask the parent to take them home, which we know is a challenge, but is a requirement that we're all learning to deal with. So then in the end of the day, the first week will look a little different, again, because we're planning to do some parent orientations at that time, maybe some small group meetings outdoors, spaced apart. But once the year begins, we're going to space out the dismissal also in incremental chunks, and have staff positioned in the hallways and at the doors to make sure that students get to their cars safely, get to their rides safely. It is going to be a challenge not to have parents enter the building unless absolutely necessary, but it's going to be much safer for everyone if we limit the access to the building, just to reduce the number of people who do have that, or excuse me, to reduce the spread of germs. Okay. Okay. So we are planning on doing aftercare, offering it for those who need it. However, within aftercare, social distance and masks will be required. So if you are planning for in-person, in the past we've been pretty, I would say, welcome in within the aftercare program to say, oh, if you need to stay, sure, it's no problem. Come on in, this year we just want to be a little more purposeful to make sure that the students who are staying, are doing it out of, not that, are doing it purposefully and out of necessity, and not, that we're not overburdening our after school staff, and that we're able to maintain social distancing during after school as well. So if you are planning on utilizing after school, please know that it will be available. But if you can think through what your time frame would be and let us, and we'll ask you for that information at the beginning of the year, that will be very helpful for us, okay? Okay, the last thing I want to do is just talk about what if someone does get COVID, what would be the protocol? And so again, what we're asking is that if a student is sick, they stay at home, all right? And probably more so than in the past, we're gonna ask parents to communicate with your child's doctor when a student is showing symptoms like a fever or a cough, flu-like symptoms, even some aspects of a cold, loss of taste or smell, any of those things that are associated with COVID-19, we're going to ask you to contact your child's doctor and to follow their directives. So we would ask for a doctor's note if a student did exhibit COVID-like symptoms before they would return, in addition to their symptoms being gone for 48 to 72 hours without medication. So that's another big change is, we know that sometimes we give them medicine and then they feel better and then we send them to school. So obviously that's going to have to change this year. We're not going to be able to continue that practice. They'll have to be without symptoms without medication for 48 to 72 hours before we can send them back. So that's if a student does not have COVID, that would be an individual student who is sick. If a student or a staff member were to test positive for COVID, that would result in anyone who had been within a 6-foot contact with that person would have to quarantine for 14 days from that time of contact. So it would be 2 weeks basically that class would go to fully online learning with a positive COVID test. We're going to follow the guidelines for what that number is. As of now, it's one test that results in the whole group quarantining. There was a time at which they said the first test would just be an individual quarantine. The second test would be full quarantine. But as of now, we're advised that the first test, the whole class or cohort would have to quarantine. Similarly, if a student tested positive within a family, the other students from that family would also quarantine. The students in the class with the siblings would not have to quarantine, but if those students tested positive, then they would, okay? And then we're still awaiting guidance on, let's say if there are more than one class that needs to go into quarantine, what that would mean. But at some point, if there were repeated situations of quarantine, that's when I would anticipate us moving more toward fully online learning. If it was indicating that COVID was spreading actively within the school community, which we don't want, obviously. So that's why we're putting all these things in place to try to prevent that from happening. So that's the best information that I have at this point. I'm going to go to one more slide and then we'll have a few more minutes for questions. So what are the next steps? I think is for every family to think about their preferred option and to make their best judgment at this time. Again, going to Ms. Stanton's question earlier, if you really don't think you're comfortable being in person, online is a viable option. We are not trying to discourage or limit people from going online. At the same time, if you are on the fence and you're not sure and you want to see how it goes, I recommend that you opt for the in-person because it's going to be more feasible to go from in-person to online rather than to go from online to in-person, okay? So if you know as of even today, you can let us know. If not, we're asking you to decide in the next week or so. I have August 10th here. But certainly by next week, we really need to know. And then continue to read your Thursday thriller in your email. That's where I'll provide the most detailed information. We'll start to put these plans into writing and share them out. And then to email Ms. Corona or call us with registration questions, or to email me, certainly, if you have other questions as well, okay? So at this time, speaking of questions, again, it's 12:07, so if people need to get going, I understand. I'm going to see if anyone else has any questions at this time. And also if anyone would give me some feedback on that idea of starting off the first week spaced out, and trying to do some parent meetings during that day, during that week, with the online learning orientation on Friday. Do people think that sounds workable? Does anyone have any suggestions or questions at this time? Ms. Burks is giving a thumbs up. Thank you. Does that mean so she's saying, I'm assuming that means no question, but if you have a question, go right ahead. Okay, well, at this time then, I think I'm gonna stop the recording. So thank you again for everyone's input and questions. I think they're all very helpful. And I will end up posting this to our website. But if anyone wants to stay on the call and ask any questions, or let me know of any concerns or decisions that you have made at this point, you could feel free to do that. And then we'll go from there. I'll be doing another webinar at 4 p.m. Hopefully you all don't have to join, because it's going to be the same presentation, and you hopefully got your questions answered. But if you did want to join, certainly we invite you to do that. Okay.